let's get back to the Steelers here. They're still in the playoff hunt with plus 130 odds to make the playoffs per ESPN Bet. There are 5 teams competing for 3 remaining playoff spots in the AFC. The Steelers have the longest odds among those 5 squads. So here's the scenarios for the Steelers to get in, okay? Pay attention here, people. Should they defeat the Ravens on Saturday? Dan and I have that game. Pittsburgh would need either the Jaguars or the Bills to lose Sunday to clinch a playoff berth. Listen to this. Even if Pittsburgh loses to Baltimore, it could still get in if the Broncos defeat the Raiders and the Jaguars lose to the Titans and Colts-Texans does not end in a tie. You got all that? Okay. Lamar Jackson not playing in this one, but Dan, the Steelers still right in the mix despite the injuries and changes at quarterback.
Sure.
How have they done it?
I mean, offensively, they've turned back kind of the hands of time. You know, this offense, and specifically the offensive line, for the last probably 4 or 5 years have been a weakness, and it's now becoming a strength. Ever since new offensive coordinators Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner have taken over, no one's run the ball more than the Pittsburgh Steelers outside of one football team, second most. And I like the fact that they're just lining up at 13 personnel, 1 back, 3 tight ends. And sometimes they're not trying to fool you. They're just going to turn around, hand the football off. This is plays that we call duo. They're trying to create double teams. Jalen Warren's become the big play guy, and Najee Harris has become the kind of the pound physical player. And then sometimes they'll get into their 11 personnel and make sure that Warren gets out on the edges. And I love the fact that they're not overly complicated. They've run 2 or 3 run plays. Sometimes it's that duo. Sometimes it's power where they're pulling the backside guard. And they're making sure to fit into guys like ideal talents and skill sets. And I think it's the thunder and lightning combination of those 2 backs that have kept them afloat. Now they've added some play action pass and motion built off that. But they're back to running the football on a consistent basis. And that at least has given them an identity on offense.
Yeah, Dio, and what's prominent is how they're doing it and how they're getting to those runs. You had that 13 personnel run, but I kind of want to explain to people why. It's because you have safeties that come down and do a job that they're not used to. This is Love trying to play and get a block, get a tackle on the edge. But because it's not something that he has a bunch of recall in, he spins out of it. Now you get the motion by the tight end, create leverage, right? You think that's the strength. We bring Deontay Johnson back across, create leverage, and then you go out of the back door and you attack corners and safeties and make those guys tackle. That is what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing right now.
Yeah.
They're not beating their head against the brick wall in the center of defenses. They're creating either personnels or they're creating leverages based on their runs to make your corners and your safeties tackle with having a blocker on them. I don't know if I've never seen a bear fight a rabbit in the woods, but I'm sure the bear leaves an ugly scene, and that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing to these little guys on the back end. They forcing them to almost be defensive linemen and linebackers.
I mean, Hawk, don't count out those bunnies, am I right?
Nah,
Come on
man,
now. But
You're
all right.
more like a bunny.
I'm more like a cheetah.
Yeah,
Maybe
just
a
calling Hawk a
honey
bunny.
badger.
Dan,
I'm more like a
you're
honey
more-
badger.
You know what,
That's
Dan?
what I am.
He's more like
honey
a hare.
You're a honey
He's like a
badger.
hare.
Dan's a
He's like
sloth,
a hare.
okay? So what are we going to call
promise
yourself?
you-
A giraffe?
It'll be a long day at the office for you.
Heck yeah.
That's all I'm put out there.
Let's
a
get George
sloth.
Pickens into the conversation here, Hawk, because he's been more involved in the Steelers offense now, especially with Mason Rudolph at quarterback.
It's been a long day at the office.
What
man
has
is
led
slow.
to that?
Well, look, I think there's been a mentality change in this.
Sloth.
There's been a mentality change with this Pittsburgh Steelers football team, and it starts at the top with Mike Tomlin. It's what we're actually been talking about. We want the Philadelphia Eagles to do when adversity hits. You guys pull together and you say, hey,
Throw it to the really good guys.
throw it to the really good guys, number one, but also don't let the outside noise affect your play. When we look at George Pickens, we all kind of sat up here, we got on the pulpit one by one, and we talked about the way that you go about being an NFL football player. This isn't the way that you become a number 1 receiver. This isn't the way you get your respect in this league because he wasn't blocking. Now, I can promise you, if you turn this film on, there are plenty of plays where he doesn't block a damn soul.
He's still not blocking.
But with that, to Tomlin's point, whenever you're losing and you're not making the plays you're supposed to, that's what the conversation becomes.
Good point.
Instead of, in 2 weeks, he has over 300 yards receiving on not a ton of opportunities. He is balling. He is putting that adversity into practice in the game and showing everybody, I am the person that I am telling you that I am, but I'm showing it with my play.
Does it look to you that they're moving him around a little bit more? Like, I always get so frustrated. They would stick him up by the sideline and be like, run a go route. It does look like they're moving him around more.
They said, if this is what you want, we're going to give you what you want. We all question. We know Antonio Brown being in the Pittsburgh locker room. We've seen Le'Veon Bell, and it's like, well, how is Tomlin able to rally these personalities? It's exactly what we just talked about. Whenever there was conversation about George Pickens and his effort, Tomlin put the onus on him, but he pulled him aside and said, hey, when you're putting this on tape and you are not matching it with the play, this is the conversation. So now we're going to give you those opportunities, and we're going to see what you're really made of.
I know a thing or two about rallying people. I got a bear, I got a honey badger, I got a sloth here. I mean, how do we make it all work? The Colts take on the Texans Saturday in Indy. This game is on ESPN and ABC, by the way. They played week 2. The Texans lost that game, but week 18, very different from week 2. Here's C.J. Stroud on that very difference.
I think I've grown a lot in a lot of different places. I think our team has grown as a whole. I think we've put a multitude of games together to make our team really kind of stick like glue. Like we've come into a great situation of now we're starting to pick up our chemistry better than ever. So it's like night and day from week 2 to now. So.
Yeah, it is. Also a nice matchup of styles in this showdown, as C.J. Stroud has been among the best against zone coverage this season, with the second highest QBR in the NFL on such plays, while averaging the 4th most passing yards per dropback. This Colts defense, headed up by Gus Bradley, employs zone at the 4th highest rate in the league, and Indy uses a heavy dose of cover 3 in particular, doing so on 33% of their pass plays. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out on the field. But Hawk, Stroud talked about how this team has changed from the week 2 matchup. Who do you think needs to play a bigger role in this one this time around? I'm
going to go with Dalton Schultz. I think there was opportunities for him the first time around. And like you said, this is a completely different team. There were plays that were left on the field. You see C.J. Stroud misses a throw here. Down in the red zone, there was an opportunity to hit him down the middle. C.J. gets hit as he throws, and then, the last play was Dalton having a drop in the game. Now, there's going to be opportunities with this zone like you guys talked about, but C.J. Stroud in this offense is completely different. There's no Tank Dell. They're going to need him to have a really big game down the middle to pace on the outsides, because they're going to key on Collins, as they should, because he had a huge game the first time, and then last week when C.J. came back, this offense got going a little bit more.
There's easy and hard as a quarterback when you're playing against a team with a ton of zone. So, one, you're going to get completions. But those completions more often than not aren't going to be chunks. Unless you use play-action pass. This is from that week 2 game. Against that zone coverage from the Indianapolis Colts, you get ball fake. CJ's great at manipulating those underneath defenders, throwing into windows when and where to throw the ball, how to release it, and the touch on it. And talking about the zone coverage, CJ's going to have these short completions. Why do defenses play zone? They're going to give you completions because, one, they think at some point you're going to hold it too long and a sack is going to happen. Or two, you'll have an offensive penalty that's going to set you back. Or three, you'll force the ball. You'll lack patience. So 2 things are going to be needed. Number 1, they're going to have to hit some of those play actions that I just showed. 2, they don't care about yardage, zone defenses. They think at some point you're going to get into the red zone. I don't care if you kick 6 field goals, score 6 times. They want you to be down in the red zone, a lesser player. CJ holds the ball in the red zone more than any quarterback in the NFL.
Wow.
He's going to have to, because he's going to have to make some plays that equal touchdowns and not just take completions just to get field goals.
Fellas, say it with me. How do you get people out of zone?
You're going to run
Say
the football.
It with me.
You're going to run the football.
Say it with me.
You're going to run the football, yeah.
Yes. Devin Singletary, to me, is a key and a catalyst. Even beyond that, Dan, using him also in the passing game and trying to hit some of those underneath and give him room to make plays with his legs. I think, look, I have no qualms about if CJ can diagnose and put the ball where it needs to be.
Sure.
Like y'all said, he did it in the first game. But I think this team's evolution as we watch throughout the season, and to your point, Hawk, with getting Dalton Schultz back, is to make sure you get him favorable matchups. Did you see, even the depth of those linebackers when CJ made that throw that you showed getting tipped to Dalton Schultz in that situation? You create those guys having to take a step forward, or giving them something to think about by not only running the football, but using your back in the passing game as well when they consistently have to think about coming up and making tackles. And then that's how I think you loosen it up to create the big plays. But Singletary, to me, is going to create a lot of advantages for this zone.
Real quick, so people at home understand, pass catcher-wise, the short completions, what's the most important thing for a receiver once you get the ball in your hands?
You're vertical. You're vertical. You find seams. I mean, the biggest thing for a receiver especially is understanding the field, and that's where the biggest difference in C.J. Stroud and where they are now, that the Colts won't be prepared for.
Yeah.
They didn't know what kind of feel that the pass catchers had for the quarterback. What we've seen all season, back then Anthony Richardson was the guy going into that game that we were all like raving about. Throughout the season, we've seen their chemistry grow. And so, to your point, they want to hit them in these holes. Receivers getting vertical, they're okay to play that game because they know that CJ's not going to make those mistakes.
Gotcha.
And now we all know that as well.
Yeah, right. Short completion and then make it count after the catch.